What is going on, Wastelanders? It is me, the Lone Vault Wanderer, with a Fallout 4 news update. Now, these updates come thanks to Mr. Matty Plays. He alerted me on Twitter to a bunch of things that Pete Hines was saying, so I'd like to thank Matty and direct you to his channel, which is listed in the description below. Please check him out. He's a great YouTuber and covers Fallout 4 news just like I do, to a great extent. So, as I just alluded to, Pete Hines has been saying some particular things on Twitter, which I wanted to talk about, that don't by any means confirm that the game is in development. It's nothing official confirming that, you know, there's going to be an announcement at the Video Game Awards, for example. It's just purely gotten some ideas into my head, and I'd like to speculate a little bit about what Pete Hines is saying and what it might mean for Fallout 4. So the first tweet that I wanted to talk about is on screen right now. Somebody asked, how long has Bethesda been in development of its next game? If you don't mind answering, please, with a nice little smiley face. And Pete Hines responded that since around the time of that blog post where they said they were moving on to their next project. Now, of course, Pete Hines is referring to the April 2013 blog post by Bethesda Game Studios. I believe it was on April 15 to be specific. And they said they're essentially done with Skyrim, done with the post-launch support, including of, you know, major DLC and major bugs and all of that. And they said that they're going to be moving on to their next project, they're leaving everything behind and beginning their full-fledged development of their next game. Now, of course, everybody is assuming that that's Fallout 4, since it makes sense in terms of Bethesda Game Studios making Oblivion, then making Fallout 3, then making Skyrim, and what's the next logical step? Obviously Fallout 4. It's a cash cow for them. It makes complete sense. But at face value, what this tweet does is just confirm that full production for Bethesda Game Studios' next game began in April of 2013. Now, Mr. Matty Plays and I were speculating about this beforehand, and this is something that I've also said in the past, and I'm sure Matty has said as well, in that yes, technically, full production of Bethesda Game Studios' next game obviously began in April 2013, but surely not all of the Bethesda team had to work on the Skyrim DLC before that point. I mean, when the development of DLC begins, the main game is done, the assets are all done, so the main projects that only need to be completed include patching post-launch bugs and anything that might crop up, any other issues, and of course working on the next DLC. But bear in mind, in many cases, typically work on DLC begins before the game has even been initially released to the public. So before April 2013, there would have been pre-production for Bethesda Game Studios' next game, and of course, you know, any video game in general, they have pre-production, main production, and then post-production. It's just kind of a typical timeline that developers like to follow. So if we use that line of logic, we can assume that before April 2013, some of the team at Bethesda Game Studios split off to start working on their next game, whether, you know, early concept planning, art design, story, setting, maybe early work on the game assets, who knows, but we can at least be confident that some sort of pre-production took place before that. Now, the second thing that Matty and I were speculating upon was that when were the Xbox One and PS4 development kits initially given out to developers? Now, Matty heard that it was in late 2011, 2012. That does sound right to me, but if we're wrong, just let us know. But if the Xbox One and PS4 dev kits were given out in that stage, then at that point, Bethesda would have been able to start tweaking their engine for next gen, correct? Because there's a common line of argument, and even I've used it in the past, when asking the question, why is Fallout 4 taking so long to be announced? And one of those arguments that pop up again and again and again is that, well, they're working on upgrading the engine, they're working on tweaking the engine for next gen so it runs smoothly, so the assets look nicer, so everything's upgraded for next gen. Now, that point kind of becomes redundant if the development kits were given way back in 2011 or 2012, because they would have had at least 1 year to work on their engine, so they could have also had a smaller team split off. You know, the very tech-savvy programmers behind the engine and maintaining the engine could have split off and started to work on the engine for next gen, upgrading more so the engine from Skyrim so that in regards to Fallout 4, it can work with the next gen on PS4 and Xbox One. So if we assume that Bethesda has had that time to work on their engine, to upgrade everything, then I think a 2015 release date for the game seems much more likely. I mean, if they had just started upgrading their engine last year, then I think the argument could be made that the game is probably going to be pushed back until 2016. But if they've had that time to work on the engine, and also bearing in mind that Bethesda Bethesda has worked with high-end PCs for many years, so they've been achieving the graphical capabilities that you can see now on the Xbox One and PS4 on the PC for so many years. So taking that into account, then it doesn't seem that Bethesda need that much longer to work on the engine and only need to really work on the development of the game itself, getting the game ready for launch. So in my mind, that makes a 2015 release date seem much more likely. Alrighty, now the second tweet that I wanted to talk about is on screen right now, and it's in response to a question: are you going to be at the Game Awards cheering on The Evil Within? Pete Hines responds, Wolfenstein, and yes, so I think he was correcting the person. I don't believe that The Evil Within is nominated for any awards at the Game Awards. It is Wolfenstein, definitely. I think it's been nominated for Best Shooter. But what this tweet confirms is that Pete Hines is going to be at the Game Awards, and we know that the producer of the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley, has been doing some planning with the ladies from the marketing team at Bethesda Softworks. So I can confirm again, we know that Bethesda is going to have some sort of involvement at the Video Game Awards. Now, whether it's Fallout 4 or whether it's just going to be Doom, we can't really say, but at least we're confident that Bethesda is going to be announcing something on behalf of their developers. And the last series of tweets that I wanted to talk about are on screen right now. Somebody asked, please could you answer if the announcement of the new game Bethesda is working on is still a long time away? Pete Hines responds, I'm not going to give a time frame. That's usually how we respond to things. The person asked the question again, saying soon or a long way away would suffice. Thanks for responding. Then Pete Hines responds again, I've been asked not to give any context or specifics, so I am not going to. Now the reason why I think this tweet is peculiar is because Pete Hines is essentially confirming that he's been asked specifically by the team at Bethesda Game Studios not to say anything about their new game, not to even talk about it, not to say anything about their new game. Now usually at a developer studio, those kinds of things go without saying. I mean, any employee contract, there are usually very general non-disclosure agreements that you'll also agree to when you sign the employee contract, saying that you won't give away or talk about any of the secrets or confidential or private information about the company to anyone else outside of the corporation. Now, in regards to development studios, of course those non-disclosure agreements would relate to not talking about any unannounced titles or video games. So because of the existence of those kinds of non-disclosure agreements within employee contracts generally, then at a company like Bethesda, it would just go without saying that you don't talk about unannounced games generally. It's something that doesn't even really need to be said specifically, especially to someone who's ahead of Bethesda and who's in charge of marketing and publicity. Pete Hines would obviously know the protocol for when developing games that have not been announced yet. You just don't talk about it, you don't give away details, you don't give away hints to the public or to fans. It just doesn't happen. But the fact that Pete Hines now has specifically been asked not to say anything, to me at least, suggests that they're in the midst of planning something, or at least slowly coming towards the back end of the development of their new game. I mean, if there wasn't a special circumstance going on, or something that happened, or something that is happening, why would it need to be said explicitly to the head of marketing at Bethesda Softworks saying, don't talk about our next game? If something like that usually goes without saying, why would it now need to be said specifically to Pete Hines? Now, this is pure speculation on my behalf, but I just think that maybe that suggests that whether it's a potential announcement or reveal at the Video Game Awards, or whether the game is kind of nearing completion, that they're ready to talk about it, as Todd Howard says, maybe development is starting to reach that point at Bethesda Game Studios, so the developers at BGS are just confirming to Pete Hines, look, we're almost there, just don't say anything, we want to release stuff on our own terms. And I think that's a completely normal thing to say. But as I said, that is just speculation on my behalf. I can't confirm whether that's true or not. All I'm saying is that at the very least, it seems odd that they would now specifically say to Pete Hines, don't say anything. But anyways, Wastelanders, those are just the updates. Again, thanks to Mr. Matty Plays for bringing this to my attention. It's 9 in the morning and I haven't had breakfast yet, but I've got to get this update out. But anyways, Wastelanders, that's all from me. Let me know what you think about Pete Hines' tweets in the comments below. And until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourself. And as always, keep fighting the good fight.